Chapter 3. The trail opened at 7 to a line that wound halfway around the green, past the gazebo, past the war memorial, kids in costumes vibrating with the particular electricity of a town that only got this loud, this collectively delighted, twice a year. I worked the entrance for the first hour, fixing a lantern that had guttered out, redirecting a golf cart loaded with extra hay bales, refereeing a brief but passionate dispute between two 8-year-old Draculas over whose cape was scarier, and watching 400 people walk through a doorway I'd built out of hay bales and dread and feel, unmistakably, delighted to be afraid. This was the part of the job nobody warned me about when I left Boston. Not the money, there wasn't much of that yet, and there might never be much of it, and some nights that fact sat in my chest like a stone, especially after a conversation like the one I just had with Gerald Whitfield. But the specific, physical satisfaction of watching a 12-year-old grab his mother's arm at exactly the spot I'd planned for him to grab it. Of watching a plan survive contact with 400 strangers and come out the other side working better than it had in my head. Marion Ferris from the town clerk's office came through in a full pirate costume with her husband dressed, somewhat confusingly, as a lighthouse. The Hendersons brought all 4 kids and stood in line for 20 minutes, chatting the whole time with Tom Rise, who'd wandered up from the fog units to admire the youngest one's homemade Iron Man armor, cardboard and duct tape, and pure 8-year-old confidence. Frank Doyle, the retired history teacher who'd sat on the Historical Society board since before I was born, worked the donation table by the entrance in a cardigan and a plastic top hat, cheerfully overcharging tourists for hot cider and pocketing not a cent of it for himself, a fact he mentioned to at least 6 separate people within earshot of me. I noted it all, filed it away the way I filed away everything that week, the small, ordinary texture of a town enjoying itself, with no idea yet how much of it would matter later and how much of it wouldn't matter at all. By 9, the crowd had thinned to the late shift, teenagers mostly, and the handful of couples who liked their haunted trails with a side of hand-holding and an excuse to get startled into each other's arms. I did my final walkthrough with a flashlight and my clipboard, the ritual I did every night of a run like this, checking fog machines, checking the animatronic in the mausoleum scene, checking the tension on the hay bale maze walls, checking, last of all, the way I always saved the best for last, the witch's cottage. It was my favorite piece on the trail, and I'd fought for it. Delia had wanted something safer, more traditional, a fortune teller's tent maybe, and I'd talked her into this instead. A crooked half-structure of reclaimed barnwood, weathered gray and genuinely old, a cauldron of dry ice set to cycle every 40 minutes, a rocking chair angled just so beneath a single bare bulb, and, new this year, my idea, over Delia's mild objection about liability, that I'd talked her out of with a lot of very confident hand-waving, a scarecrow-dressed mannequin slumped in that chair, meant to read, in the strobing orange light, as either a witch at rest or something considerably worse depending on how your brain wanted to play it that particular night. The fog machine had cut out. I crouched to check the reservoir, flashlight clenched between my teeth, the way I always held it when I needed both hands. And that was when I noticed the smell wasn't dry ice. I want to say I knew immediately. The truth is it took 3 full seconds of my brain insisting the mannequin's hand was wrong, too pink, too soft, the fingers curled in a way a prop's fingers simply don't curl, not stitched or molded but relaxed, in the specific, terrible way only a body relaxes, before the rest of me caught up to what my eyes had already understood. The scarecrow in the rocking chair was Harlan Voss. I don't remember screaming, though Priya swears I did, one long note that brought half the remaining trail crowd running before I even got my phone up to dial. I remember the fog machine sputtering back to life on its own 40-minute timer, right on cue, dry ice pooling white and low around a dead man's very expensive shoes, exactly the effect I'd designed it to make, applied now to something it was never meant to touch. I remember thinking, with the specific, useless clarity that shock sometimes hands you instead of anything useful, that it was good lighting. Excellent lighting, actually. I'd nailed the lighting. I remember Nate Colby arriving 11 minutes later, badge already out, already moving people back with the calm, practiced authority of a man who had done this before, somewhere that wasn't Thistle Hollow, already looking at me with an expression that was two parts, "Are you okay?" and one part, "Why is it always you?" Wren. He crouched where I'd crouched, careful not to touch anything, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle working. "Don't tell me you found him." "I found him. Of course you did." He said it without heat. Nate never said much of anything with heat, which was either the most infuriating or the most reassuring thing about him, depending entirely on the day, and reached for his radio without taking his eyes off me. "Okay, I need you to walk me through exactly what you touched, and I need you to do it slow. Nothing." I checked the fog reservoir. I saw his hand. I stepped back. I called 911. My own voice sounded very far away, like it belonged to someone standing several yards behind me. "Nate, that's not dry ice fog anymore. That's just fog, regular fog, and it's 40 degrees out, and there's a dead man sitting in my witch's cottage in front of 400 people who paid $12 a ticket to be scared on purpose." He looked at me for one more second. The kind of look that in a different life, a life with better timing, might have meant something more than it was allowed to mean right now. And then he stood and started saying words like scene and perimeter, and nobody leaves the green, and Hollow Night for the first time in the town's memory did not finish.